Mum had good reasons to stop these grandparents seeing her 6-year-old son. They'd criticised her in front of him. They'd passed messages from Dad. And after returning him 2 hours late, they ignored her calls. But almost a year later, Oliver still missed them. So was Mum protecting her child, or was she now keeping him away from two people he loved because of mistakes they'd finally learned from? You be the judge. This is a fictionalised scenario designed to explain how the family court in England and Wales may approach a dispute like this. Every case, of course, depends on its own facts. This isn't legal advice. Hello, and welcome back to Family Court, You Be the Judge. I'm Neil Andrews, a Mackenzie friend and an ASILEX paralegal. Each week, I take you through a fictional family court dispute. You hear the evidence as it emerges. You decide what should happen. Then we compare your judgment against the court's. So subscribe if you enjoy making difficult family court decisions from the safety of your own sofa, which is considerably more comfortable than doing it during fluorescent lighting while somebody searches through a ring binder, and also a little easier than when it's as hot as it is right now at the time of recording. In the previous episode, the court found that her mother had genuine reasons to fear the father, but decided that a carefully safeguarded relationship could still continue. This week, the dispute moves beyond the parents, because Dad's parents want contact of their own. Oliver is 6. He lives with his mum, Rachel. His father, Daniel, has parental responsibility, but his contact has become unreliable. Sometimes Daniel sees Oliver, sometimes he cancels. Sometimes several weeks pass without anything happening. That matters because the obvious first question might be, why don't the grandparents simply see Oliver during Dad's contact? The answer is that there often isn't any Dad's contact. Daniel's parents, Susan and Michael, had previously been a major part of Oliver's life. They collected him from nursery and later from school. They took him swimming. He stayed at their house. He had his own bedroom there. They attended school events and knew all of his routines. They knew which TV programme he demanded before bed. They knew which cup he insisted upon using. And they knew precisely which sandwich he'd request before consuming absolutely none of it, even with the crusts taken off. They had completed the full grandparent qualification, snacks, soft play, and returning the child home with an object so large that Mum immediately regretted allowing birthdays. Oliver loved spending time with them, and Rachel had once trusted them. But when Rachel and Daniel separated, that relationship began to change. Susan and Michael believed Rachel had treated their son unfairly. Rachel believed they excused Daniel's behaviour and blamed her for the separation. Initially, the disagreement stayed between the two adults, the two parents. Then the boundaries began to move. Daddy misses you very much. Who's been visiting Mummy's house? We don't understand why Mummy won't let you stay longer. Susan said she was reassuring Oliver that Dad still loved him. Michael said he was only taking an interest in his grandson's life. Rachel heard it differently. Oliver would come home asking, why can't Daddy live with us? Why doesn't Mummy like Grandma? Why can't everybody be a family again? Rachel believed the grandparents are placing adult problems into the mind of a 6-year-old. Susan and Michael said they were answering his questions honestly. Family court does attract an impressive number of conversations which apparently become essential only after somebody had been specifically asked not to have them. The final breakdown came after one Saturday visit. Susan and Michael were supposed to return Oliver at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock passed. Rachel called. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. Oliver was eventually returned shortly after 7. He was safe, he was happy, and he was carrying another large new toy, which may have been lovely for Oliver, probably wasn't the ideal opening exhibit in the grandparents' case for respecting parental boundaries. Susan and Michael said they'd lost track of time. Michael's phone had been on silent. Rachel didn't believe them. Susan had previously complained that 5 o'clock was far too early. Rachel concluded that they'd deliberately kept Oliver longer because they disagreed with her decision. There was no allegation that Oliver had been physically harmed. But Rachel said the incident proved that they didn't respect her as a parent. She ended the visit. Susan and Michael sent messages. They asked Daniel to intervene. They sent birthday and Christmas presents. Rachel allowed Oliver to receive the presents, but she refused direct contact. Weeks became months. Almost a year passed. Rachel said Oliver mentioned them less frequently and had settled without them. The grandparents said he was gradually losing a relationship that had once formed part of his everyday life. I've encountered both sides of this misconception in practice. Some parents believe grandparents have no possible route into court. Some grandparents believe that the title itself provides an automatic right. The legal answer, as usual, is less convenient for absolutely everybody. Grandparents don't generally have an automatic right to apply for a child arrangements order, but that doesn't mean that they can't apply. And Susan and Michael decided to try. Before we enter the courtroom, what do you think should ultimately happen? Option A, one daytime visit each month with strict boundaries. Option B, indirect contact only, cards, letters and video calls. Option C, no order. Contact should restart only if mum agrees. Or option D, no contact. The grandparents lost that relationship through their own behaviour. Put your initial answer in the comments. A, B, C or D. Don't worry about the precise legal process yet. Decide what you think is best for Oliver. Because the grandparents are about to discover that the court wouldn't immediately ask whether contact should happen, it first asked whether they should be even allowed to bring the case. Susan and Michael needed the court's permission to apply. They used a C2 application to seek permission and provided evidence explaining their relationship with Oliver and what it was that they were seeking. And what they wanted was deliberately modest. One daytime visit each month. No alternate weekends, no school holiday blocks, no attempt to take Daniel's place. No overnights. The permission decision wasn't a miniature contact hearing. The judge wasn't yet deciding whether Susan and Michael should see Oliver. The judge had to consider the nature of the proposed application, their connection with the child, and whether allowing the application to proceed might disrupt Oliver's life so seriously that he could be harmed by it. Before I consider whether contact should take place, I must decide whether you should have permission to make that application. That distinction is important. Permission opens the courtroom door. It doesn't decide what happens once you're inside. Although it's probably still best not to enter carrying a 4-page explanation of why every difficulty was entirely someone else's fault. Susan and Michael relied on their previous role in Oliver's life. They produced photographs, school collections, birthday celebrations, trips to the park, swimming, ordinary family moments. Rachel opposed permission. She said the application would reopen conflict Oliver had begun to move beyond. She said the grandparents had undermined her, questioned Oliver about her private life, and encouraged him to view her as the person keeping Dad's family away. But the permission hearing also exposed a weakness in the grandparents' position. Their statement described the problems as minor. Rachel said that wording demonstrated precisely why they couldn't be trusted. The late return wasn't a misunderstanding. Discussing Daniel wasn't a misunderstanding. Questioning Oliver about her home life wasn't a misunderstanding. They were choices. And Susan and Michael still appeared to believe the real problem was Rachel's reaction. The judge accepted that Rachel's concerns had substance. The grandparents had crossed boundaries. The late return had understandably destroyed trust. But they also had a significant and long-standing connection with Oliver. Their proposed application was limited, and there was no evidence that allowing the court simply to examine the issue would itself disrupt Oliver's life so seriously that he would be harmed by it. So, permission was granted. This decision does not mean that contact will be ordered. It means only that the proposed application deserves to be considered. So, the grandparents had cleared the first hurdle, but they hadn't won. In fact, the permission hearing had made their position more difficult because Rachel was now describing their conduct not simply as irritating or disrespectful. She said it had caused Oliver emotional harm. And once that allegation was made, the court needed more than competing statements about who'd behaved badly at a handover. It needed to understand Oliver's experience. The judge directed a focused Section 7 report. There were no allegations of physical abuse, no allegation that Oliver had been neglected in his grandparents' care. No allegation that their home life was unsafe. The disputed issue was emotional. Had Susan and Michael made ordinary but serious family mistakes? Or had they drawn Oliver into a pattern of conflict which meant that restarting contact would harm him? The family court advisor, Kafkas, spoke first to Rachel. I spent months rebuilding his routine. He'd come home asking why Daddy couldn't live with us. He was 6. He shouldn't have been worrying about any of this. Rachel accepted that Susan and Michael loved Oliver. She accepted they'd once been very important to him, but she said love wasn't enough if they couldn't respect boundaries. So the advisor asked whether she would reconsider contact if they genuinely understood what had gone wrong. Rachel paused. Maybe, but I need them to understand. Not, I'm sorry you felt that way. I need them to understand why I stopped it. I'm sorry you felt that way. A magnificent sentence which includes the word sorry while keeping responsibility at a safe and legally irrelevant distance. The advisor then spoke to Susan and Michael, and initially they were defensive. We've done nothing wrong. Rachel has always been controlling. They said Rachel had isolated Oliver from his paternal family. They said Daniel had been treated unfairly. They said the late return had been blown out of all proportion. The advisor asked a simple question. If you've done nothing wrong, why do you believe contact stopped? That question changed the interview. Not immediately. There was no dramatic soundtrack and sudden conversion. Michael still tried to explain why 5 o'clock had been unreasonable. Susan still insisted she'd only wanted Oliver to know that his father loved him. But when the advisor took them through the incidents one by one, their position began to move. They accepted they shouldn't have passed messages. They accepted the questions about Rachel's home placed Oliver in an uncomfortable position. Susan admitted that criticising Rachel in front of Oliver had been unfair. Michael eventually accepted that keeping Oliver for 2 extra hours had been a deliberate decision, not a misunderstanding, not losing track of time, a decision. Well, I thought Rachel was being unreasonable, so I decided 2 hours wouldn't matter, but it wasn't my decision to make. That was the first convincing sign of insight, because insight isn't simply promising not to repeat something while continuing to insist it wasn't wrong, and that's important. It's being able to identify what you did, why it caused difficulty, and what must change. Lessons have been learned is considerably more persuasive when somebody can identify the lesson without first consulting their position statement. Then the advisor spent time with Oliver. Oliver was 6, so this wasn't a formal interview. The advisor spoke to him through play and ordinary conversation. When Grandma and Grandad were mentioned, he smiled. He talked about baking cakes, swimming, feeding ducks, building dens, and apparently, Grandad cheats at snakes and ladders. Oliver said he missed them. He wondered whether they still loved him. He didn't present as traumatised by the previous visits. He appeared confused about why 2 people who had once been part of his life had suddenly disappeared. He remembered comments about Dad being said, but at his age, the conflict hadn't yet become the defining feature of his relationship with his grandparents, and that was important. The report didn't excuse what Susan and Michael had done. It criticised them. But it also found that Oliver retained a warm attachment to them and that their mistakes didn't automatically justify ending the relationship permanently. Kafkas recommended 2 supported introductory sessions. If those went well, contact could progress to unsupervised daytime visits each month. The first session arrived. Rachel was nervous. Susan looked terrified. Michael managed to achieve that very specific expression of a man who wanted everyone to believe he was calm while looking as though he'd misplaced an important passport. Oliver entered the room. He looked across. He saw them, paused, and ran directly into Grandma's arms. No hesitation, no fear, just recognition. They coloured. They played games. They talked about school. Oliver showed them a drawing. The relationship didn't need to be built again from nothing. It was still there. There was one difficult moment. Michael began to say, "Your dad would have..." And then he stopped. "Actually, should we finish the game?" The advisor noticed. Michael had come close to repeating the old pattern, but this time he recognised the boundary and corrected himself. The second supported visit also went well. No questions about home. No messages from Daniel. No criticism of Rachel, no adult conversations. Just a 6-year-old spending time with his grandparents. And the case had now changed. Rachel had been justified in stopping the old arrangement, but was she justified in keeping contact stopped when the evidence now suggested a safer version could work? This is your final decision. Option A, 1 unsupervised daytime visit each month with strict boundaries. Option B, supported contact should continue for another 6 months before any progression. Option C, no order. The grandparents should wait for Rachel to rebuild trust voluntarily. Or option D, no further contact. Their previous behaviour makes the risk too great. Right, final decision A, B or C in the comments below. And tell me whether your answer changed after hearing from Oliver and seeing the supported sessions. The court chose option A, 1 daytime visit each month. The judge did not find that Rachel had acted improperly when she stopped the previous arrangement. Susan and Michael had undermined her. They'd involved Oliver in adult issues. They disregarded the agreed return time. Rachel had been entitled to bring that arrangement to an end, but the judge also found that stopping the old arrangement and refusing every future arrangement were two different decisions. The evidence had moved on. Susan and Michael no longer described everything as a misunderstanding. They accepted responsibility. They demonstrated during the supported sessions that they could follow boundaries, and Oliver's response showed that the relationship remained warm and beneficial. The court is not restoring the previous arrangement. It is establishing a more limited arrangement designed around Oliver's welfare. That distinction was central. The grandparents didn't receive contact as a reward, and Rachel wasn't punished for ending it. The order was made because Oliver benefited from the relationship, and the identified risks could now be managed. The order provided for one Saturday daytime each month. No overnight contact, no discussion of Daniel, no criticism of Rachel, no discussion of the proceedings, no questioning Oliver about life at home, no passing messages, and collection and return times had to be followed. The arrangement was limited because grandparents weren't parents. It preserved a valuable relationship without allowing them to recreate the role they'd previously held. The judge's reasoning came down to four things. There had been a substantial pre-existing relationship. Oliver still wanted and enjoyed that relationship. The grandparents had moved from denial towards genuine insight, and the proposal was proportionate. One daytime visit each month, not alternate weekends, not half the holidays, not a competing household. Just enough regularity to prevent Oliver from losing people that remained important to him. The difficult part of this case is that both of these things were true. Rachel had good reasons to stop contact, and Oliver had good reasons to see his grandparents again. Those positions, they're not contradictory. They explained why the old arrangement ended and why a safer, more limited arrangement replaced it. And that's often where family court decisions become difficult. The court isn't always choosing between one adult who's right and another adult who's wrong. Sometimes they are. Sometimes it's deciding whether a relationship which previously became unhealthy can continue in a different form. The family court asks what outcome now serves the child. So, did you agree? Would you have ordered monthly daytime contact? Would you have kept it supported for longer? Or should Rachel have remained in complete control of whether contact restarted? Put your final answer in the comments and tell me which fact mattered most to you. If you enjoy making these decisions, please hit like and subscribe. Every week you'll get another fictionalised family court dispute, another difficult judgment, and another opportunity to tell me precisely where the court went wrong. Next episode. Next time, the court faces a completely different question yet again. A mother is serving a prison sentence. Before she went to prison, she played a major role in her 6-year-old son's life. Now he keeps asking to see her. Dad says prison is no place for a child. Mum says being in prison doesn't stop her being his mother. Should the court order prison visits? Should contact be limited to letters and telephone calls? Or should there be no contact until she's released? That's episode 15, The Mother in Prison. And until then, you be the judge.